One of the cool things that has happened over the past several years is insulin pumps, and they have really evolved very quickly over a short period of time. And so, I want to give you an overview of what an insulin pump is, specifically what it is not, and go over why it may be the right decision, why it may not be the best decision to move forward with an insulin pump. I'm a huge proponent of technology, but I think it has its limits that are important to understand. And so, just as it's important to know when to use cruise control in a car, it's important to know when to use a pump and when not to use a pump. But by and large, I think insulin pumps are certainly the way to go if that is the decision you and your doctor come to. So, what is a pump? So, an insulin pump takes place of injections. So, on a typical child will get at least 4 injections a day of insulin. So, the long-acting insulin once a day, plus at least 3 rapid-acting insulin shots, assuming 3 meals a day. Sometimes more, depending on corrections and snacks, etc. So, an insulin pump, there are multiple brands and multiple types, but in essence, you have a device that has a catheter, and it essentially goes into your skin, into the same subcutaneous tissue where the injection would, and it's delivering insulin continuously. So instead of getting instead of getting a long-acting shot once a day, so for example, if your long-acting is 20 units a day at night, you don't do a long-acting shot. The insulin pump only has rapid-acting that it is infusing continuously. And then when it's time to eat, you still have to count your carbs and tell it how many carbs you're about to eat. That is by far the conventional insulin pump. There are some newer technologies. They're not readily commercially available yet, especially in pediatrics, where you may not need to tell the pump how many carbs you're about to eat specifically, but just sort of guesstimate. However, that is, as of this video, that is not the case. So the pumps that we've been using for the past several years, there are 3 major brands. One is called Tandem. The other is by a company called Insulet. It's called Omnipod. And the third is by a company called Medtronic. The difference between the 3 is the following. Tandem pumps have a long catheter, and they are what we call tubed, along with the Medtronic pump. The Omnipod pump is tubeless, so it's literally a pod that you stick on the skin, whereas the others, you have a small device, probably half the size of a standard phone, and then it has a catheter. Either way, the insulin is in the actual pod or pump, and then it gets delivered in a variety of ways. So you need to know what your number of carbs you're about to consume and the blood sugar. Now, the reason pumps have gotten really cool is that they now can talk to the continuous glucose monitor. Okay, so depending on what CGM you have, the pump may or may not be able to talk to it, but in general, there are sensors available that talk to the insulin pump. And the reason this is particularly cool is that you still need to put in your carbs, because it just doesn't do a good job otherwise, knowing how much you're eating, and you'll end up, your blood sugars will end up going high, and it's just hard for the pump to catch up. But the reason it's cool is if you do sort of under guesstimate your carbs or over, and your blood sugars start rising, or for any other reason start rising, say in the middle of the night or the like, then the pump will give you slightly more what we call basal insulin. It'll start increasing the amount of insulin it's infusing every 5 minutes or the like. And then if you're dropping really fast, it will stop the delivery or slow down the delivery. And so what we find with insulin pumps is that, it is admittedly a bit cumbersome to calculate your carbs and then get your pen out and prime it and then find a spot and give yourself an injection. It's not difficult, but it just takes getting used to. The pump makes it a little easier because all you're doing now is punching the numbers in to a device, and then it is delivering the insulin. And with the systems that are referred to as automated insulin delivery systems, they talk to the sensor, and so it sort of knows what your blood sugar is. You just have to force it through, and it'll give you the correction based on that. So pumps are great. The downside is that because you don't get long-acting insulin, typically, if that catheter becomes dislodged overnight, or there's a leak, or it malfunctions, you need to be very aware of your blood sugars and know that these things can happen. And if they do and they go unnoticed for a long time, several hours, 6, 7, you can easily tip into DKA, which is what we're trying to avoid. You can easily end up with very high blood sugars and end up with ketones. There would typically be a lot of warning signs before that. Your blood sugars will go up, and anytime blood sugars are high or above 300 for more than a couple hours, it warrants looking into further. So again, I think pumps are certainly the way of the future. I am a huge proponent of them, and I recommend you talk to us about initiating pump therapy when you're ready. There are a lot of subtleties and details that go into it that are beyond the scope of this initial education, but they do exist. They're not fully automated. I think that's the big takeaway. They do require user input, and but they also reduce the burden, and some people just don't like having them on them. They feel they're too tethered to something. So that may be, again, a discussion to have with your child. So happy to talk more about it, but that in essence is what pumps are.